Hi, welcome back to Newbies to Movies. My name is Justin, and we have a very special episode this week. We're incredibly excited to welcome a phenomenal filmmaker to the show, director Ana Asensio.
Thank you. Hi there.
Yeah, so you might know Ana from her intense debut thriller, A Most Beautiful Island, that took home the Grand Jury Prize at SXSW. And now she joins us to talk about her sophomore feature, Goat Girl. The film was originally made in 2025, and we're thrilled to have her on this week. And it's kind of set in the suburbs of 1988 Madrid. It is a deeply moving, nostalgic coming-of-age story about childhood innocence, rigid traditions, forbidden friendship that kind of changes everything. And it's all through the eyes of an 8-year-old girl. And it's a really beautiful masterpiece. I really enjoyed watching it this week. But before we dive fully into that, we do always like to have our guests tell us kind of what's your favorite movies and genres to watch in your own free time.
A bit outside of the box. I'm not like a big fan of or maybe the most commercial films are not the kind that attract me the most. I like, art house, independent cinema the most. Hey, I mean, really, this it feels here more unpredictable and it doesn't seem to follow a formula to I'm always on the lookout to very curious.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we started this podcast, to really dive into a lot of different stuff we wouldn't typically, just see in the theaters per se. But yeah, so kind of getting into the movie, what made you kind of shift from being an actor and director and going into this one just directing? How was it to kind of take a step back in that sense?
Yeah, so what I read, what I always saw myself, and but when we got into production and we were looking for the girl, the streets of Madrid, I realized that the film relies 100% on the shoulders of this little girl, and that meant like she would need me 100% at all times. And I felt that playing her mother, it would have taken some time for myself and away from her. And being also the director, I thought that I couldn't let that happen. I had to be there for her and for the film, and and then I thought about that. But all through the creation of it, I kept thinking that I was going to play her mother. But I think it was the right decision. Was able to be.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really awesome to hear. So obviously, Goat Girl feels deeply personal to you and kind of reflects the 1980s Madrid childhood. How much of Elena's story would you say was autobiographical, and what specific memory did you say, yeah, I have to make this a movie?
So blue collar neighborhood, and this the moment that framed the story, the May 1998 thing, all the elements that happened there happened. All of them are facts. Thing. And I remember very vividly this kidnapping of this businessman by the terrorist group in Spain. So that was going through the preparation for the first communion, and the priest really resembles, or at least my memory, the one I had when I was little. So that comes from that, from my own sources. However, like the family, nothing to do with my family. So kind of like this idea how it would have been to have a grandmother, kind of like also make it more idyllic. It's not like that you always hear that, no?
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And with kind of diving into the plot, this film really dives into the innocence of childhood friendship, but definitely leaning towards more mature realities we can see as adults, as viewers. How did you kind of approach the pacing of the film to ensure that the plot felt like a natural slice of life rather than kind of forcing the high stakes drama that we see in typical Hollywood movies today?
Well, one of the weird is, I mean, I remember so vividly when my mom would say, "Oh, it's gonna be at 9 p.m. today." And, oh, whole afternoon is only 4 hours as an adult, like nothing.
Hmm.
Wow. The length of summer. Oh my God, the length of a summer was brutal. So I wanted to capture how slow the time is when you're little, and therefore I thought that the way to film it and the way to process every single scene had to feel long, very long. I hope I'm not scaring the audience,
Yeah.
but the whole point is to really bring you into the 10-year-old girl. And so the more sensorial, the more you feel like you are that child, the more you capture and understand the story and the journey that she goes through.
Yeah. And then kind of diving into that with the characters. Obviously, we have Elena and Sherazade being such a big part, and I would call it the heart of the film. And how did you kind of develop the character of Sherazade to ensure she felt real and kind of like a layered child rather than just a symbol of freedom for Elena?
Yeah. I hope it's not too loud here, just for viewers.
No, it's okay.
So there's all sort of noises around me at the lobby of cinema in New York City. So the movie's playing right now and people walking into bathrooms. But so I wanted to create this idea that when you find someone who's very different than you and your life as a kid, you feel this instant attraction. It's magnetic. Like how did you do things? So it was very important that was initially shown and introduced as how kids see things, right? This aura of magic in a way, but then to bring it down very realistic and who this girl really was, the Romani girl that Elena needs and wants to desperately be her friend. So, it was a combination of playing with how the imagination of the children transforms things, even the colors, even the sparkles around, and then grounding it to when the traumatic moments hit to make it very specific to, no, this is not that beautiful as you might have imagined. This is her life, living in a campsite, not having regular water running into your house and into walk for a long, long time to get a bucket of water and kind of like understanding that it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. And then with the cinematography of this movie, you obviously decided to capture the whole film through Elena's eyes. What kind of conversations did you have with your cinematographer or director of photography about camera placement, lighting, and to kind of ground the audience in this 8-year-old's perspective?
So one thing that was very clear from the beginning for me was that the camera had to be eye level with Elena, the main character. I wanted to see only what she would see and how she would see it. So if you're at this height, so you just barely see above the tabletop. And therefore, that's what we're going to see, right? I didn't want to have the audience being an observer of Elena, but rather be Elena's eyes, and get as close as possible to her. So the first half of the film has one specific approach to the camera, and I always also knew that the second half had to have a different approach, a different story. So the camera steps back and her world widens, and we frame the two girls rather than just having Elena. So, these things I had it very clear in my mind that I wanted to look that way. And when I discussed it with him, he got very excited and on board and he, jumped on it, and it was an opportunity to do something more unconventional than what we had done at that point. So yeah, it was exciting. I mean, I'm very visual, so when I write the script, I almost you can see where the camera is going to be placed and what is going to be framing out and framing in. And so I had very clear ideas coming into the shoot of what I want.
Yeah, I definitely appreciated this film because of the cinematography. That's a big thing we always talk about on our show. So I definitely appreciated it. Kind of with the children, obviously children don't always have the best vocabulary, especially when it comes to things like grief and confusion. Yet, children, they absorb everything around them. How did you kind of approach the dialogue for the kids, as it really felt authentic, I felt like, and it still conveyed a very deep emotional weight as well?
Yeah, so, I love children always. And when I'm with children, I just become another child. Basically, I bring whatever age that the children are to myself and to the way I communicate. So I knew that I had to speak their language in order to understand. And so I wrote things, but I had my doubts, of course. I said, would you say it this way? And if they felt like that was not right, they would say it to me. And if something was complete to say, I would be like, this is giving me the wrong vibe because you shouldn't be trying so hard to say something. That means that it's way too advanced for you. So let's figure out another way to tell this moment that I think is important in a children way. So it was kind of like, a flexible collaboration of what I wanted to hit, but making sure that for sure they would say it their way, because otherwise it would sound forced.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear about the collaboration between director and actor. I think that's so important and what makes film so great. Getting into the set design too, obviously 1988 Madrid, what specific details were you like, I have to make sure that this goes into the film the right way? Obviously, we had things like the Catholic classrooms, as well as the courtyard, the apartment complex. What really stood out and said, yeah, I have to nail this?
It was, from the very beginning, I remember talking to the production designer. This movie has two parts, two clear parts, the real world and the magical world, and then the third world that was when, not to spoil, but the third part of the third act of the film, right? So there's very distinctive worlds and camera work and style. It shifts from one act to the next one. And so I remember telling her that for me it was very, very important that her world is very narrow, like all children. So in the first world, it's just home, church, and school. And we're going to see very little because the camera is so close to Elena at all times. But whatever we see has to be accurate, to be period accurate. And so we searched for the right neighborhood that we created. It was a combination of different areas that will make us feel that that was the neighborhood. The school playground too, we painted it in tones that make sense for the color palette that we designed for the film. And then the apartment, we were very lucky because we didn't have much budget to put together an authentic looking 80s apartment. And we found one apartment that was being for sale listed. And we asked them if they would rent it for us for a few days so we could shoot all the interior scenes. And this apartment was kept intact since the 70s because there was a dispute on the will, couldn't get together, an agreement. So they closed. And now they decided to open up and they put it for sale. But everything, like the light switches, everything was authentic from that period, the 70s. And I thought it was even better than what I would have imagined because in this economical, the social stratus that the family is in the story, they would not have been updating the apartment. Oh, now it's 88. Let's have it the last style table that came out in the market a few years ago. No, like in my apartment growing up, there was wallpaper from the 70s. So it felt like everything is even more dated because of that. But it's because, it's because of the possibilities, the economical possibilities. You're not upgrading your apartment all the time. So it was great. So it was just perfect. It was just exactly like that. We changed a few things, but I even kept furniture for the film. And then the props were all authentic from the 80s. We were able to find it in something similar to eBay, a platform that is in Spain that sells used and old items. So even the clothing is from the era, like everything. There's nothing fake that doesn't belong to that period.
That's so awesome with the apartment. Because I mean, what are the odds, something like that works out? That's really cool to hear. And,
That's,
part of the magic of the movies.
That was like such lack, such, like it was such a blessing. Like it's impossible those things to happen. In fact, there was another thing that I was like, okay, today, because the weather was so bad and it was not matching the lighting from another thing that I wanted to insert the scene that I shot after I finished the main production. And everyone was so worried. It was rainy, it's weird. And I was like, no, you know what? I think all is happening because I'm going to get a rainbow. And sure enough, I got a rainbow.
Yeah.
Haven't seen a rainbow in Madrid, I don't even know, since I was a little girl. And that day, I got a rainbow. That rainbow that comes out in the movie is real. And it's just, I'm putting so much love into this film. I mean, this film is a labor of love. This film is not made for making money, I guarantee you, for so long in the film. There was just, I put so much love because I really deeply care about this story. And I felt like good things happened to me during the production because of that. I don't know. I believe in this energy that you put out and things come back to you.
They definitely do. So you cast Alessandra Gonzalez and Juncal Fernandez, who had no previous acting experience, at least from what I could see. And as an actress, as yourself, what was your technique for kind of guiding the young girls to give such, raw, beautiful performances? I know you talked about working with them a little bit ago.
Yeah. So, and that was the most important thing. They always feel like they were having fun, and this was at the same time be very stern with the concept that this is theory, meaning whatever we accomplish, we're gonna have to lock it and repeat it later on, and we might have to repeat it several times because that's how films are made. You have more than one take. But so it was through playful games and finding a language that they could understand, because often I would be very, very specific, especially with Elena, with Alessandra, and say, oh, show me this little subtle anguish. And she will be like, I was like, oh, you don't understand what anguish means. But I know. I was like, okay, you're right, you're right. So, and then I will find another word to try to explain, wanting to be super specific. But of course, they can't understand certain things, right? So, and when
Yeah.
Juan has a different sensibility than Elena. Elena is Alessandra is very technical, very precise, a perfectionist, and Juncal playing Cerezade, she is a free spirit herself, and she would be like, "I just want to do this because I would do," and I was like, "I know, but you are not you. You are Cerezade." She's like, I know, but I wouldn't do this." I was like, not you. You remember your Cerezade? And she's like, okay, I don't get it, but fine, I'll do it for you. But like, it was like, she's her own. Oh my God, she's a wild, funny girl and very charming. But it was very different like with one and the other. Often I had to pull them aside and don't say the same thing to the two of them together because that was chaos. No, there was a different understanding from both parts.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Also, kind of a funny question, but I've always been curious about in filmmaking when working with live animals. What was it kind of working with? How was it working with the live goat at the in the third act of this movie? Mainly, how was there anything that ever went wrong? Was it not cooperating ever?
Listen, working with a goat, and goats don't follow any directions. They do whatever they want. They're stubborn. And on top of that, she got pregnant right before the shoot. So she was highly
Wow.
sensitive. It was the hottest summer I had experienced in Madrid. It was so hot. She could only work for 5 hours altogether. She had to have a lot of breaks. The animal wrangler was, very careful with her and everything. We had to be basically working around her as if we had a Hollywood star on set. And then on top of that, she didn't do anything I wanted. I would say, okay, I had this visual, this is going to happen. And then when we do this, the goat is going to turn her head. Oh, no, forget about it. I would do this. I would do ring, ring. I would do anything. And the goat would be like, not moving. Oh, no, no, she would do all these catalogical things also on set whenever, and we're like, cut, we can't. No, okay, can somebody come and clean this? Listen, I do not recommend anyone to work with goats in a film. It was like, yeah, the goat was cute, but listen, no, 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 not no, no, too rebellious for me.
And then kind of diving into the soundtrack, I really enjoyed the score of this movie. I think it plays a huge role in kind of balancing the realism in Madrid, but also, like you were talking about, the magical fable elements of Elena's mind. What was kind of your directive for the music to ensure it didn't quite overpower the intimate moments?
So again, that was part of like the concept of the three different worlds. Well, actually four, because then we have the dreams, right? That's a separate
Mhm.
story. But so I wanted to make sure that in the first part of the film where everything is grounded and gray, the gray world, I used to call it, for Elena, there was no music, there was no soundtrack. There was only the diegetic kind of music that would have play in scenes. So that was very, very important for me. Then there was the other world with the everything that is related to Seretade has this score that I wanted to be rich and wondery and like magical and had all these sort of elements. And the composer, sorry, we're in a theater lobby, so there's all sort of
No
sounds.
worries.
But the the soundtrack had to be like really big, in that sense. It had to be special and magical. And he worked, creating this beautiful music. I loved it so much. But yeah, so it kind of like it has to be there, but nowhere else. And then because the composer is also the sound designer, I often with my previous film as well, I didn't want any score. And then the score came again from the sound designer who composed the score too. So the two times happened the same thing. I was like, for me, the sound is the score. The sounds informs us to the state of the character, the situation that is happening, the atmosphere. So there was a rich sound design, especially in the first half of the film, where there are things informing us, the neighborhood, the playground, things like that. So it was, to me, it's part of in a way, the score, the music, everything that comes and brings you into this world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been a big fan on how, music and sound design in general kind of carry heavy themes in movies. I think that's really important. So with this film, obviously it contrasts heavily religious ideas versus kind of the free-spirited ideas. What do you really hope audience take away with them regarding the themes of classism, religion, and free will as well?
So in a way, I take it as a cautionary tale. It could be, like children are pure humans that are starting to understand the world, and they have their own pace. And we as adults, we come with imposing meanings of words. And so we tell them this is different, this is dangerous, this is scary. I think that if we were more careful about that, we'll be living in a different world, especially allowing children to have their own time, and don't put prejudice into them, because it's fine if you as an adult have your prejudice, but children should not have prejudice, and children should not be outcasting other children because they're different. So I think that's to me is important. I that's the thing that I care the most, and I think that we live in a society that, as globalized as it is also very separatist and cruel with one another. And I think that, we have to be careful with children, allow them to show us that kindness is there too, and not seeing the differences, because they don't see it. We are the ones telling them, so I guess that.
Yeah. And then I did a little bit of research before this. You had previously mentioned you were influenced by the dark imagery of the painter Francisco Goya, and then also anti-fascist poet Leon Felipe. How did you balance those heavier influences with obviously a tender family drama like this?
So I think that keeping the perspective of the 8-year-old girl is what allowed me to put some heavy concepts into the film, and hopefully don't sound pretentious, just because it's the eye and the ear of an 8-year-old girl perceiving these things. And I hope it's not getting us pounding concepts to just, remark it so much what I wanted to say, but rather what what a girl could perhaps understand, and that, just the essence of what that painting meant, because it's been told to her. And so I think that just filming it with the gaze of with a girl helped to don't make those concepts too heavy, but rather free for the audience to take it or leave it or think about it, or just, kind of like, yeah, don't put too much
Yeah.
importance into that.
Yeah. And then one more question I have. I thought the editing was beautifully done in this movie. I liked the transition between obviously the real world and then Elena's dreamlike world. What was kind of the biggest challenging when editing this film, trying to stitch together those two and make a clear picture for the audience?
So, well, first of all, one of the things that were not easy is that I didn't have that much material shot, because it's a very short shoot. And so there was not so much to play with, but I work with a great editor, and he's so experienced. He's a well-known editor, won multiple awards, and work all through all sort of film genre, right? And he allowed me freedom, as opposed to telling me this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do. He said I would come up with ideas, and he would say, if you want to do it, I would be like, but can we do this? And the majority of the time he said, we can do whatever we want, Anna, go for it. So that was so liberating because he had so much experience and I trusted him so much. And he really became my friend because he cared deeply about the film. And there was obviously a few times that he would say, no, Anna, I wouldn't advise to this. I think it's going to be not original, but maybe too jarring and too, and I listened to him because of that. It gave me so much trust. So that was a wonderful experience. I learned so much through the edit. But it didn't come so easy as I imagined to say, to figure out how can I create this magical world when I think I have the right or enough footage but again, the music comes and all these elements that make films, what they are, which is great.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Well, we appreciate having you on, and congratulations on all your success on the film. Any other remarks you have for the audience before we head out?
No, I mean, I hope that people miss their inner child as much as I do, and they feel like attracted to come to see a movie that really brings your inner child out, and it put pause on the hectic time that we live, like the rush that we're always, and it's just all of a sudden you take a pause for an hour and 30 minutes, and you're transported to another time.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Justin.
Well, of course, anytime. Thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully we'll see you in the movies.
Like,
Bye bye.